What's the scariest dream you ever had? I mean, one so chilling, it stayed with you. Please like and subscribe to support this channel. Lying in my bed looking at my curtains, as I tend to do when I'm trying to get to sleep. So I believed I was awake, when I hear something walk into my room and slide its hand under my duvet from the bottom of my bed. It wrapped its hand around my ankle and started to drag me from the bed. I screamed so loud in the dream I woke up screaming in real life. I probably shouldn't have watched The Fourth Kind right before I went to bed. And my parents waited until the next morning to say, "Oh, thought I heard you shouting last night." Nice to know they'll rush to help if anything serious happens. The dream itself wasn't scary, but I have since grown scared of the feeling it produced. Let me explain. I remember being entangled in what seemed like millions of smooth, shiny wires. Completely trapped. I remember the panic of being trapped set in. Very remnant of claustrophobia. Then it hit me, I felt like every thought I was having was being screamed at me, but inside my own head. As if someone had turned the volume of my thoughts up full blast. It was one of the most unsettling, worst feelings I have ever had. It really is hard to explain. The thing is that once I woke up, whatever this was persisted for a while. I can best explain it through analogy. It was as if normally my thoughts are just a guy, talking calmly and quietly. But in the dream and shortly afterward it felt like this guy was screaming at me. I don't mean to say that there's a man inside my head who tells me my thoughts or anything. That's goofy. This is just my best way of explaining. It has since happened a couple times without the dream causing it, and I have yet to find out what it is or why it happens. All I know is that dream has stuck with me for over 10 years because of the unexplainable, terrifyingly awful feeling that came with it. I'd also like to add that I remember it almost feeling like I was hearing something loud too. Like that feeling of pressure on the ear. Fuck. This is all so hard to explain. I wish there were a wiki page on it or something. Just wanted to say thanks to those who have responded. While it sucks that others experience this, it is nice to not feel alone. I was 4. I was being chased through my elementary school campus by a knife-wielding troll. The kind that had the colorful hair and the jewel in their belly button. He was 6 feet tall and had the knife to my mother's neck. He laughed menacingly and it echoed down the hall at me and then slit her throat. He held her head in the hair, her decapitated body twitching on the ground. He dropped her head and started toward me. I turned around and ran as fast as I could. I felt a hand grasp my ankle, and I woke up. That was nearly 20 years ago. I still think about it more times than I'd like to admit. I had the weirdest dream a few months ago. I was in this living room with a bunch of people, hipster-ish I guess, with these old couches and rugs and an old beat-up coffee table. Pretty normal room, except it was a fucking morgue. One whole wall was covered in those cabinet things they put dead people in, you know, the metal ones? Except they weren't metal, they were glass or plastic or something you could see through. The rest of the walls were bare concrete. These hipsters and I were just having a normal conversation. There were coffee cups on the table and one of them was playing with a Rubik's SP cube. At random moments in the conversation, some of the drawers on the wall would fly open and these dead people with majorly fucked up, bloody faces would join the conversation. Then the guy with the Rubik's cube was trying to fit the cube into one of the coffee cups, with a smile on his face that faded as he noticed the cube wouldn't fit. Similar to a 2-year-old playing with those boxes with shapes and pegs. He threw the Rubik's cube and it bounced on the table and nailed me in the face. All of them started throwing ceramic coffee cups at me, and once those were all gone they forced me to pull out all of my hair in small handfuls. All of the drawers on the wall rushed open once I was done, and the dead people started eating my hair. It might not sound that creepy, but I woke up screaming and terrified. I am not sure if this counts, but I used to get really bad sleep paralysis. I have an old wooden rocking chair in my room. One night my eyes fluttered open and I was laying on my back, with my head turned towards that chair. On that chair there was a woman crying her eyes out staring directly at me as she pulled out her insides. Her skin was a pale gray color, and she had blonde hair. She just stared at me. I was scared shitless. I tried closing my eyes, and then I felt a pressure on my chest, common in sleep paralysis, you guessed it. She was sitting on my chest pulling out her innards all over my chest while crying. I actually wet the bed. I was 20. I had a dream where my 3-year-old daughter and I were standing on a dock on a lake when she slipped off and fell in the lake. She sank like a stone. I immediately dived in after her, swimming straight down to try to catch up with her. I remember her looking up at me, reaching up to me, opening her mouth and trying to scream. I remember seeing the bubbles from her mouth drift up towards me. I was swimming downward as fast as I could, while trying to grab her arms, her pigtails, anything. I remember reaching the point where I knew that even if I reached her, I would not be able to make it to the surface. I was resolved to not let her die alone. I keep swimming down. For all my efforts, she was sinking away from me faster than I could swim toward her. I watched her slip further and further away, the image of her growing blurrier and blurrier in the murky water. And I wake up. I immediately ran to my daughter's room and pick her up and hug her. At the time, I was in the process of separating from my then wife, so to me there is no great mystery surrounding the meaning of this dream. After this nightmare, I couldn't sleep for a week. When Inception came out, my friends and I joked that Hollywood stole my dream and made it into a movie. It is night and I am running through the canyon behind my house. There is black vegetation looming around me on either side of the path, which faintly reflects the whiteness of the moonlight. The stark contrast of the light and dark emphasizes the impossible straightness of the path. I am running and running when suddenly I am stopped in my tracks by her. Now everything is dim except for her. She is glowing, mysteriously white, beautiful, and terrifying. She smiles. I am running away until I wake up in a cold sweat. It was just a dream. It is still dark, but I decide to roll over and get out of bed. I scream. She is there, standing above my bed, smiling. I dash out of my room, down the stairs, out the garage, feet pummeling asphalt as I run down the road away. But then, she is there in front of me again, smiling. Scared out of my wits, I stop and I wake up in a cold sweat. It was just a dream. It is dark, but I decide to roll over and get out of bed. I scream. She is there again, standing above my bed, smiling. I dash out of my room, down the stairs, out the garage, feet pummeling asphalt as I run down the road away. But then, she is there in front of me again, smiling. Scared out of my wits, I stop. She glides away and begins to smile at and talk to a group of my friends on the side of the road. I try to scream at them and I wake up in a cold sweat. It was just a dream. It is dark, but I decide to roll over and get out of bed. I scream. She is there again, standing above my bed, smiling. I dash out of my room, down the stairs, out the garage, feet pummeling asphalt as I run down the road away. But then, she is there standing with my friends, smiling and talking. I try to warn them, but she turns to smile at me and I wake up in a cold sweat. It was just a dream. A long, disturbing dream, but just a dream. It is dark, but I decide to grab my laptop and talk to a friend about this. I almost expect her to be there, but she is not. I start up my laptop and then begin chatting with a friend, asking if he knows anything about this sort of creature. He says he has these dreams too, but it is a different person, a smiling boy that befriends his friends. Oh no, this is real? She and he are both some sort of real vampire? What the hell do I do? Then I remember, the girl is real and I know her. Maybe she can help. I start chatting with her and relax. They were just disturbing dreams and I am probably just overly stressed from school. She comforts me and asks me if I can pinpoint the cause of these dreams. I ponder this for a bit, and remember that this seems to have all began when my mother hung up a mosaic of a house above my bed. I speculate that it might have inspired these dreams. I snap a photograph of it and send it to her, asking her what she thought of it. She does not respond for a while, but after a long pause, she asks, "Why do you have a mosaic of my house?" My head spins. Mouth agape, my head whips back to the mosaic. I whimper. There is a small figure in the doorway of the house. It was not there before. Chilled to the bone, I scramble out of my room and down the hallway, only to be confronted by the same damned mosaic. I scream silently when I notice that the figure is slightly larger and closer. I keep running, but my house is now a maze, and every corner the mosaic appears. Every time I nearly run into the mosaic, the figure is nearer, more threatening. I am at wit's end, on the brink of losing my sanity out of sheer terror. I halt dead in my tracks in front of another wall, and now the figure is life-sized and looming in the mosaic. The figure moves. It leaps out and I wake up screaming and crying. I have a reoccurring dream where I claw into my chest with my fingernails until I can rip my heart out. Once I have my heart in my hands, I eat it and feel it still pulsing as it slides down my throat. Then I cradle the hole in my chest until I wake up. The entire dream I'm always crying and screaming, but filled with the most savage desire to eat my heart. It's so strange, and I always wake up with scratches on my chest. It gives me the shivers just thinking about it. I've had nightmares that stuck with me when I awoke because of their vagueness and the fact that the gray area I can't remember is probably so dark I couldn't trick my brain into conjuring it up while I was conscious. But the shit that really haunts me is when reality is non-existent and I am trapped in pure mental seizure. Only way I could even attempt to describe it is if time flowed like scratched record. Had a dream where I was carrying around a large green gem. Every time I came to a choice, I'd look through the gem and it'd show me many outcomes and I'd pick which outcome I'd use. Slowly, my choices became more and more morbid. At one point I was at a crosswalk and looked through the gem and saw myself hit by a car, or slip and break my neck. I decided to try and run away from it, and every choice from then on was death or painful death. Eventually I ended up in a gray, pink area that I slowly realized was just every possibility of anything that could kill me, blurry and faded. I eventually found a gun and tried to shoot myself just to end the madness, but every time I pulled the trigger, I'd see my corpse fall in front of me, but I'd still be okay. After the third attempt, I freaked out over the 3 dead me's at my feet and gave up. After a while, I remember just sitting down in a chair and slowly fading into the background of all possibilities. I used to live in a house in an older part of town. This house had all sorts of trap doors, secret passageways and cool shit. But I'm pretty sure it was haunted. Not only did I have some pretty creepy experiences as a kid, trapped in the basement for one, but I had some recurring dreams that I still remember to this day. Started having this one when I was about 7 to 8. Sitting at my living room coffee table, drawing. No one is home, except my infant brother, who is sitting in a rocking swing chair in the kitchen. Then people start coming out of my basement, past my brother in the kitchen, past me, and out the front door. I have no idea who they are, but they're coming in a mass exodus from my basement. 2. Both of these dreams happened before I got trapped in my basement, young kid again, around maybe 10 or so. Adventuring around my house. Head through my kitchen, through the laundry room and carport and into my basement. When I open the door, instead of a basement floor, there is what seems like a bottomless pit below me, with ladders, going to all different levels of said pit. When I was around 14 years old I started having these short reoccurring dreams of me in front of a temple, sitting cross-legged with a little girl in my lap. Everything was in black and white, and she was a small white girl wearing a white dress and had long black hair. She looked so innocent. Somehow in the dream, I knew she was slowly dying in my arms. The reason why this creeps me out a little, is because I kept on having this dream. Only every time I would have it again she would creep closer and closer to death. The worst part is that I had this agonizing feeling that there was something I could do about it, but I had no idea how to stop it. Eventually I had the dream where she finally died in my arms and then the dream stopped. I still feel like I failed her. I dreamed I was browsing Reddit on my living room table when I noticed 2 chopped off penises near my external HD. I wasn't sure they really were penises or fingers. Yeah. So I asked my brother and, laughing, he told me they really were the penises he chopped off of his friends. Then I lost my shit and started yelling at him and crying, until I choked myself with crying and couldn't breathe anymore. Then I woke up. I was sentenced to death by decapitation for an unspecified crime. It didn't faze me that much. I was being all macho and Braveheart and shit, right up until the point where they put my head on the block, and in that moment it suddenly became real. There was this fucking wave of absolute terror, by far the most scared I've ever been in my life. Then the blade came down, and there was nothing for a while. Next thing I remember I was walking around this fictional town really carefully, trying to keep my head balanced on my stump. I barely ever remember my dreams, but this one was vivid as fuck. Still creeps me out when I think about it. I used to have this nightmare all the time where I'd be in like this complete white emptiness, like you always see in cartoons or TV shows when they like go to another dimension or something, with my dad, who's always been a really great guy, never ever threatening or anything etc. Anyway, we'd just be standing there and all of a sudden he'd get this look of horror on his face and point behind me and let out this terrifying scream and I'd turn around expecting something horrible but there was nothing. Then he'd start laughing and give me a hug and tell me he was sorry and everything's fine etc. Then again in like 5 minutes he'd do the exact same thing, and I'd have the exact same gut-wrenching feeling as if something horrible was going to happen, but I'd turn around and there'd be nothing there. I'm 19 now and haven't had this in years, but I'll always remember it. TLDR, in my dreams my dad's an evil cunt who scares the shit out of me every 5 minutes. It was actually a two-parter, 3 if you count the dream within a dream, when I was 12. It wasn't even scary as a dream, more because of the implication. Night 1. It started out normal enough. I was walking through the desert and out of nowhere my mother shows up, desperate to tell me something. I listen, and she begs me to wake up. This is a dream, please, open your eyes and wake up, so I did. I was confused when I actually woke up, and went back to sleep. Don't remember other dreams that night. Night 2. Same premise, I was walking through the desert, but no mother to be seen. I then remember what she told me. If in a dream desert, wake up, please, wake up. I open my eyes and wake up, in a medieval prison guarded by some sort of monsters. Naturally, I am scared, but the people in that prison were terrified. Telling me this wasn't supposed to happen, and that I should please go back to sleep and wake up in my room. It took a while for me to get to sleep, being in a prison and all, and the longer it took, the more terrified they became. Eventually I went to sleep and woke up in my room, but I still wonder if that dream was trying to tell me something. TLDR. Dreamt I was walking through a desert, tried to wake up, woke up imprisoned in a different dream still knowing I was dreaming. Hanging out with my family in the living room. My brother, who has a very short buzz cut, leaves the room, saying that he's going to go shave his head with the belt sander in the garage. It made sense in the dream. A few seconds later, a fine red mist starts spraying from the ventilation duct in the ceiling, followed shortly by blood dripping from the vent and soaking through the ceiling in a line coming from the direction of the garage. My parents and I rush over to the garage and throw open the door, just in time to see my brother, whose head had gotten caught in the belt sander and most of his face sanded off, get thrown forcefully sideways by the force of the sander into the bandsaw, which quickly decapitated him, and also cut off his hand. His body kept standing, stiffly twitching, as his neck and arm stump spurted blood and sanded face bits into the dust collection system, which had been distributing the gore into the rest of the house's ventilation system. At which point I woke up in a cold sweat and had to resist the urge to call my brother at 3 in the morning to make sure he was okay. I can still remember the smell of the blood as it started misting through the vent, and that sickening, stomach-sinking feeling as you know something has gone horribly wrong and you're already too late.